gonna put a little sign-up sheet, just so we don't wind up with like 20 veggie trays and nothing else. And if you have any questions, you can text me or contact me with the email going out. But someone asked me the week before it, and I'm like, because we're having a Sunday social hour after the Dharma talk, December 18th. So I hope that
You want this one?
I think so. Are you too long? Okay. Maybe.
Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
So good morning. Usually I know what I'm going to be sharing the morning of the talk. I guess I just don't get it before then because my own mind would get all mixed up in it and just become something that I want to talk about, something that I want to share. So I try to deliberately empty my mind and wait for an inspiration. Some of that depends on you because the Dharma talks are designed for those who will hear it. I mean, we can read something later, but we're just reading something that actually occurred due to the causes and conditions that come together for certain people to be together. So the Dharma talk that you read about, that wasn't for you. It was for it was for the people who were present, and now you're just reading their conversation. And we can always take something away from that, and we can use it to benefit us in our own lives. But we do have to remember that that wasn't spoken for us. The thing about all Dharma is that all Dharma is impermanent. So we think about everything being impermanent, except the Dharma stays the same, but that's not really true. And you could say that it stays the same in the sense that it never loses its capacity to liberate, but you can't say that the actual words that were spoken, that wisdom, that it's a prajna, but it's a language prajna, that does not stay the same. It's specific, unless somebody, when I was a Baptist minister, they taught us in Baptist seminary how to prepare your sermons. And when I was in my first church where I was giving sermons, they rate you on how well your sermon is and so forth. Well, when I was giving my first sermon, the first thing they show you how to do if you're going to run a church successfully is you have your sermons, all 52 of them laid out for the year, and so you just come in and you give your sermon. So the training is more on how to deliver something as opposed to getting any kind of direct inspiration for what the people need to hear, so that's why the pastors, when they're preaching, so they teach you stuff like that, how to arouse and lift up the congregation. But that's not the same as having revelation knowledge and speaking directly into the suffering of people. And so so all of that had to go away, and so I saw the difference once I started giving Dharma talks. I could observe and see which Dharma talk fell flat. When I say fell flat, it could be some information. It's good, always good to have some information, but that was not about information. It was about a kindling that has to take place in the heart. I'm not talking about this heart that beats, but I'm talking about that which is the very essence of our being. Some call it the heart. That's why we're getting ready to undertake a year-long study on the Heart Sutra. But that's not the heart of flesh that's beating in your chest. Some use the word your spirit. That's not a word that we have in our Buddhist lexicon. But you could, if that has a meaning for you, that means something other than like this human being perspective, something deeper than that, something more fundamental than that within you, then you could say that. We call it the Dharmakaya, which is the empty nature before identification arises, that is perfect in every way. So we would say that everyone has that fundamental nature, otherwise they're not sentient. But that fundamental purity that is a part of and not separated from everything without discrimination is obscured, just by the conditions of our birth in samsara. So we develop a personality around false appearances. When we say false appearances and that things that we interact with and people and ourselves are, when we say that it's illusory, we don't mean that it's not really here. It's all really here. But what we mean is that it has come together. The aggregates have come together and they will fall apart. So false in the sense that it wasn't originally in existence, it wasn't originally appearing, but through different causes and conditions, aggregates and elements have come together to produce something. Like I am this Panyawadi, earth, air, fire, and water, right? But at some point, Panyawadi, as you know her, like through observing this body and whatever is animated in this body that gives you a sense of that's Panyawadi and that's Sukha, then that's going to fall apart. So false in that sense, false in that it's not a permanently existing phenomena. I'm not a permanently existing phenomena. The thing is that we give credence and we give permanence to um, these impermanent existing phenomena. And so we build our whole life upon them. And so we thereby create suffering for ourselves. So the things that we have, when we lose them, we suffer because we took them as being permanent and we took them as being ours. So the people that come into our lives, we develop an attachment around them. We take them to be ours, and when we lose them, then because we have taken them to be ours, we suffer a loss. This is the kind of suffering that we talk about that's in samsara. Samsara doesn't mean just on this human plane. We had to put our cat to sleep the other day, and the other cat that's at the house is going around looking for him. He went everywhere through the house. He didn't see him. So then he went and sat at the door thinking, oh, he must be outside, and he just sat at the door and sat at the door, and um, he wanted to go outside to look for Toby, and so he's trying to figure out now, 2 days in, where is Toby? So it's not just human beings that have attachment, So we may have a heightened sense of attachment, like he may not understand what we call death, and that Toby's not here. He'll get the idea that Toby's not around anymore in a little while. And so when our last cat died, anything can be used as Dharma. When our last cat died, he went and he hid for a week when it became clear to him that the cat that died was not coming back, and he went into a depression. So it's not just human beings who suffer in this kind of way, but depending on the degree of sentience that you have and the operation of the consciousnesses, then one falls into a deeper sense of regret or sadness, remorse, worry, doubt, agitation, anger, and also on the positive side, excitement, joy, anticipation. I mean, you can name it, but the Buddha says that whether the mind is going towards negative thoughts of grasping and attachment or going towards positive ones, the mind is still agitated. So the only space where the mind is not agitated is when the mind is not attached around anything. It just allows things to come and things to go. Now, sometimes I'm sure at some point in our life, we lived a life because we all started as little babies, but we go through a stage where we're not so attached to things. We consider some things like a hindrance, an obstacle. We just want to be free, whether it's free love, whether it's just the independence. When I left my parents' home, I had a nice room, comfortable. I didn't have to buy any food, didn't have to pay any utilities. I didn't have, I didn't hardly have to do anything because I had other siblings and I was the baby. So it was like really great, really great, but I decided I wanted my freedom, my independence. I wanted to come and go as I pleased, so I moved out. Now I'm struggling to pay the rent. I sometimes I don't have food. Now I'm going to visit my parents, not because I love them, but I need to see what things I can get. Sometimes it was money, sometimes it was food, sometimes, but yet I still liked that independence, because it gave me a sense of personal freedom, although there was suffering attached to it. And so it was through that time that I came to see that not all suffering is bad, but that there are stages that we go through in our development to learn something, but as we're learning it, there is suffering involved. So it can be good suffering. Then you don't have to be 50 years old acting like an 18-year-old. And so it's wonderful when we can recognize. Now, I didn't know anything about cause and condition and all of that. Like if something went wrong in my life, it was your fault. If something, if I didn't get something I wanted, I was angry because the person didn't give it to me. If I asked my mother for money and she asked me to do something, I didn't want to do what she asked me to do, but I did want the money, and so she starts her whole diatribe. Well, I've asked you to, are you going to give me the money or not? I mean, and that's how I was. So she gave it to me. That I'm not like her. She gave it to me. But when my children were coming up, because I knew how I was, they couldn't come at me that way. Though, matter of fact, when they turned 18, they didn't have to tell me they wanted to play. Yeah, 18 now. What is it that you like to do? I'm sure you've been giving some thought to it. One said, well, I want to be a beautician. Fine. I sent her off to school. And so that she wouldn't have to come back home. The other one wanted to do something else. Fine. I sent him off too. And I loved it. And they never came back home. And it was just wonderful for me. But I learned that from being their age in my mother's house. And the things that I put her through, because she would have to contend with my father if she didn't give them to me. And so, so I learned all of those things. And I said, you know what? My children not gonna be like that, because I'm liable to like stomp them down. I'll go to 6 hells, if they're like me. And so, so I worked hard at developing, my children so that they could be responsible, be respectful. None of my children ate before we did. They always knew they were at the back of the line. Who buys the food eats first, but a lot of people, like, they kowtow to their children, and then when they grow up, the world, I mean, their children don't belong to the world, and they have a difficult time in life because they feel entitled, or because they just don't have the kind of training that gives the adequate respect to those who should be respected. They don't have the adequate experience of the joy of gratitude, and so they think that it's wrong. They just don't have a kind of sense that will prepare a table before them, and so they suffer deeply. And to a great extent, it's I'm not a parent blamer, because I think that everybody's the owner of their own karma, but it surely is, if we take on things like having children, it's our responsibility to bring them up in a certain way so that they can not only be productive members of society, but so that we decrease the inevitable suffering that they have. So we live in a time and in a generation where there is so much suffering going on amongst the young people, because they have not had an adequate kind of upbringing. They have not been established in a certain view, and it can be frustrating for us to know how to interact with. Many of them are now young adults, but adult is the operative word. Young or old, adult is the operative word. So we're having to interact with them in life, adult as to adult, but they're not adult. And so it takes an enormous amount of capacity and development for us to be in a world full of adult children. The thing is, children can be really, really cruel. They may not have all the power that adults have, but they certainly have an untamed mind. a mind that has not been conditioned, you know, adequately, just from a time perspective, to know which end is up and which end is down. And so we find ourselves at in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, oh Jesus, 70s, 80s, you know, that I'm on the top end, but we find ourselves living in a world that is run by adult children. And I mean, there's, so what alternatives do we have? I mean, it's no, you know, like a fine wine, you know, no point in leaving before your time, you know, let that thing age and it's good. So we don't want to go anywhere, you know, but yet we are confronted, you know, with this. And so it brings us some trepidation, some anxiousness, some worry, you know, some fear. And we have to first tackle and surmount that inner turmoil, you know, in order for us to be useful at all. So at a time that we should be able to be giving wise counsel, we're still struggling with our demons. And so the purpose of the Dharma then is really to primarily to point out our faults. And it's not like a blame game, but it's to help us to put away childish things, come into our true wisdom, and then we can be of suitable help to those who are young and full of energy, you know, and maybe didn't have the right kind of guidance, but when we encounter them, take them as our own child and do the best we can. And maybe, you know, we don't do that good because one plants, another waters, and somebody else reaps the benefit. So, but don't think of it from a personal standpoint of what you have given, but think of it only as one's elder role in nurturing, in that sense, and not holding to it and looking from a personal perspective of what's in it for me, because I could tell you not a thing. And it's not even intentional, but children are selfish, you know, because they are, they don't have the development that's necessary. Not even their brains are not even functioning, you know, on all cylinders. Some things they don't even come into an awareness of. Their bodies are still forming, you know, so they have all kinds of things going on, and they don't have the capacity. And if we hold that in mind, we'll find ourselves being able to be, when I say more patient, I don't necessarily mean tolerating wrongdoing, but that one can recognize that when someone perpetrates something towards you or that is harmful to you, it's not as if they are just deliberately trying to harm you. They're just steeped in their own ignorance, their own self-preservation, their own whatever. And when you understand this, then it actually soothes, takes away one's fear of what another can do to you, what harm another can do to you. It takes away some of that fear. It doesn't mean that we're not vigilant, you know. Nothing is absolute, doesn't mean we're not vigilant, but the sense that we need so much self-protection is not so prominent. We just need the ordinary amount of caution. And when one becomes extraordinary, one develops an extraordinary capacity to not be afraid, to be fearless, to be able to penetrate or look beyond their own suffering and see the suffering of others. So developing or cultivating that bodhisattva mind, and everybody wants to be bodhisattvas, right? But before one can do that, one has to develop a certain capacity within themselves. And so a lot of times we want to go out and help, we want to do things to support other people, but we haven't developed the kind of selflessness that's necessary to do that. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes on when the Buddha was talking to the Kasambians about principles. And he was talking to them about the principles of cordiality. And I thought that this is where the talk was leading me to, that is the principles that create love and respect, that conduce to cohesion, non-dispute, to accord, and to unity. But then something else caught my eye and it took me in a different direction. And so I'd like to start there. He talked about the status of an arhat and how that needs to be cultivated and developed before one embarks upon the bodhisattva path, because it takes certain abilities to really walk out your true goal. And so he talked about an arhat understands that there is no obsession unabandoned in me that might so obsess my mind that I cannot know and see things as they actually are. My mind is well disposed for awakening to this truth. And this is the first knowledge attained by him that is noble, supramundane, and not shared by ordinary people. And so it requires of us a deep introspection into what's constantly on my mind, how I think about others, how I think about what's transpiring in front of me. And he talks about obsession. Now, obsession is something that's in me. It's not something that's in somebody else, regardless of what they do, whether they do good or don't do good or whatever, but the obsession is in me. Where does my mind go to? What is it? What kind of states arise in my mind when something occurs, whether I like it or don't like it? It's we're always outer fixed on things, but this is requiring a deeper inquiry to go inward to see how is my mind at this moment when I encounter this thing or when I encounter this person. So I say a lot of times that because of my past history and things before I got on this path that I used to do in business, I have to be very careful to stay as unengaged in business as I can. Now, once I become a holy being, it doesn't matter. Then I can handle business, and business is business. But before then, I have to be very watchful every step of the way, because it triggers, and I'm going to consciousnesses, it triggers latent thoughts, it triggers talents and abilities that were in conjunction with a conduct that I had at that time and a way of thinking. Like I would constantly say, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. I was trained by bankers. And so that's incongruent with my current ideal. It's incongruent with a bodhisattva heart. And so when I'm doing business, now I'm thinking about what's beneficial for me, and I'm thinking about what's beneficial for the person. I know when somebody comes to me, they don't know what's going on or what's happening. And then I'm thinking it would be easy for me, to manipulate or take advantage or to do something. And I'm like, no, that's not going to be good for them. And I tell them why it's not good for you. There was somebody who actually wanted to buy hardwood, but I knew they wouldn't be able to handle it. And I just told them, this is not good for you, uh, and part of me was like kicking myself, that was the old bad Panyawadi, was kicking myself for like, like you get what that's that's on them. They want to buy it, I want to sell it. What's the problem? But but the other Panyawadi, that's transforming, was sitting on this shoulder saying, they don't have the fortitude that they're going to need to be able to deal with this property. They're just not. And so I just told them, and they were, a little put off, but then they were later a little bit relieved because the things that I knew they would have to do and put in place, I was on them like a dog on a bone, and they didn't even know where to start with anything. And so that's what I'm saying. When one's mind starts shifting away from what is false, the false appearances of this world, then one will begin to clearly see their obsessions. Now, other people may not see them. And I'm not saying you got to go around and tell all your business like I do, but like I really don't care. I don't really care about, all I'm trying to do is make the 100. I'm after the 100, 99 and a half won't do. And so I tell you these things about myself, exposing myself to give you the courage, not to expose yourself, but to examine yourself, to thine own self be true. Because this is where the growth occurs. This is where one begins to actually walk the path. And that's an internal thing. So we can fool people on the outside, but it's a terrible thing for one to fool oneself. And so one will be challenged as they go through the Dharma, because the purpose of the Dharma is to show us our shortcomings and why we can't reach the goal that we're trying to reach. And sometimes we can think like we're really good people. If we compare ourselves to others or what we think we know about others, then we could say, like, I'm really a good person, or when one thinks about what one, how thoughts come to one's mind about what I should do, but I'm not going to do that. And we think I'm a really good person because somebody else would have done da, 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 da. Even I would have if you caught me on a different day. So we have to be continually looking at the mind, the thoughts that arise in the mind, and how they line up with the Dharma, even when we don't see any fault in it, we don't see any harm in it. If it's incongruent with the Dharma and you're using the Dharma as your guide, then you just have to keep sitting with that thing, sitting with it until you understand the shading, the nuances. Sometimes it's just, you only need to take just a teaspoon of it, just enough to give you a caution. Sometimes you need the whole thing because we are so off in our thinking, but sometimes we just need a little bit of it. But maybe the caution was the whole thing. It was the whole teaspoon of salt, but you just need a little pinch. So you have to decide that. That's for you to determine. The caution is there, and however much of it, slice off a piece, however much of it you need. So the Dharma is not always to be taken like 100%. When I say 100% literally, what I'm saying is you can't always take the whole thing. And you shouldn't always take the whole thing, even though it may be given in its fullness. You have to know yourself to know how much of it you need, to provide the right amount of flavoring, in your mind. And so becomes a wonderful thing. Oh, we do apply it to other people though. It's easy for us because we're so used to looking outward. We're so outward focused. This is our tendency, and it's turning that ship around and turning it inwardly and shining the light in there actually is the purpose of it and what we should do. It doesn't mean that we don't see out there, but what we see out there will be reflected, or we'll only have a capacity to see according to the brightness that's in here. So if it's dark in here and this is our light, then we won't be able to see. But the brighter we get in here, the more it will reflect out there in a way that we can see things in their totality. We can have an understanding that allows us to be useful in the world and not afraid. So we have to know when our mind is obsessed, and not just know it. We have to take an action that would be beneficial and useful. We have to know how to stop. Like when the mind starts going, we have to stop it. Nobody else can stop it for us. We have to stop it. And that takes, when you're doing something, you have to do things over and over and over and over to get better at it. So I'm not saying beat yourself up so bad when you try to stop it, but you couldn't stop it. You can just recognize I didn't stop it. And when it has stopped, you can recognize now I have let it go. Could I have done that sooner? I could have. What prevented me? I wasn't willing to. It takes a certain willingness. I mean, most of the times that we're wrong, like executing a wrong action, wrong speech or whatever, it's not that we don't know. If we're honest, we know. We just right now, I'm not committed to that. Just not committed to that. So when we're not committed to that, call it out within oneself. The more you do I want to be committed to that? I mean, how important is it to me for some of the things, goals I do have in place now, some states that I do want to get into, before I can get into that state, which is on the 5th level, I have to be able to get up onto the 1st level, and then the 2nd and 3rd and the 4th, and then I'll be there. But I can't want that and be unwilling to get up on the 1st platform. And so it becomes an exchange for us. I want this, and I want to do that. Which one is the most important to me? And we're asking ourselves this, and we're thinking about it. And we're seeing how the me rises up. That's the me that knows to do this, but I'm just not willing to do it right now. I remember one time my husband did something or said something, and I railed on him, and he said, "Well, I was gonna fix it. You didn't give me time." And that meant, he already knew he was wrong, and he was gonna come back, and take care of it, but in his own time, And he said, and he was accusing me, you didn't give me time to come fix it, And I mean, and then I was madder. It's because you already knew it was wrong. And instead of coming, you're just going to lollygag and take your time. And I'm in suffering because of something you said. And, and he said, but he was like that. He'd take his time. And when he came back, he could be so loving, so apologetic, but at some point I was like, you know what? You got to do this before your stuff gets out the gate. And not after and on your own time. And so I started shifting, and I was wondering, why is it that we are like this? The good I would do, I don't do. What I don't want to do, I do. That was my question. That was my question. It ain't got nothing to do with God and Jesus because that was 100% love right there. But what the problem was, I was saying, like, God, I ain't got no problem with you. Jesus, I ain't got no problem with you. But these people out here, that's where my problem is, you know. And they would say, like, you think I'm going to have a conversation with you about them? That's what would come up in my spirit. We can talk, but we ain't going to talk about them. I will talk to you about you. And that's when I began to open up my heart and mind to let me, I used to sing a song, and when I sang it, it would be glorious inside of me. I sing, open my heart, Lord. I want to see Jesus, to reach out and touch him and tell him I love him. He said, you need to look inside. You need to look at you. And then I was like, well, I don't know how to do that because our whole theology teaches us to keep our eyes on you. I don't know how to do that. And he said, he said, you can learn, but you'll have to step outside of this learning. And I was a Bible thumping, hardcore. That's why I understand hardcore Christians. I understand the Bible thumping. I understand that God was like that, But it said you're going to have to step outside. Nobody could have gotten me to step outside of the church. Nobody. But it was a yearning that I had in my heart to know something, so that I didn't just have reliance on whoever I thought was good, whoever I thought was worthy, whoever I thought, as to not have a reliance on, but I wanted to be just like him. So whatever idea I had in my mind of who Jesus was, of who the Holy Spirit was, I wanted to be just like them. Not just groveling for some grace or some mercy, but I wanted to be just like them. So I went through this process, investigating other spiritual traditions. And I loved them all because all of them have some level of truth, some aspect of truth, have the truth, I'll say. But what I would get wouldn't be enough. I was hardcore. I needed more. It just wasn't enough to handle me. The one who looked so good on the outside, but knew something, a little bit about herself on the inside, but didn't know how to change that. And so I just kept going. Every place I went in just a short period of time, 2 months, 3 months, I'd gone through the whole theology and blank, I hit that glass ceiling again. They ran out of good things to tell me. And they ran out of ways to tell me how to correct myself. And I knew I was still untamed. And then finally I encountered the Dharma. And that whip is still cracking. But the thing is, it's all right, because I want to be excellent. And then I get to the end and find out I gotta die to myself. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to be excellent, and he said, and then I'm hearing something about you gotta die to yourself. Now I'm like, I already died and I'm alive in Christ. Nope, you gotta die to yourself, and now I'm learning that, and but it's wonderful because I have finally gotten to the place that I'm not attached to myself, not in the way that I was. And I find that there is no danger in that water, but there is a freedom, there is a liberation in that, because we're only giving up a false identity that has been imputed upon us by our limited capacity to see. And so we have these 6 consciousnesses, that we can readily identify, the 5 that are tied to our aggregates, right? So and so that's what we taste, touch, see, hear, smell, and think. Taste, touch, see, hear, smell of the 5, and think is the 6th one. So there's the 5 consciousness that connect us with each other and with the outer world, and then we think. That's the 6th consciousness. That thinking doesn't come out of nowhere. That thinking is based on information that's come through the other 5. So I see something, and then I think about what I see. I hear something, then I think about what I hear. It's tied into what I heard, though. And I make an assumption then about what that means to me. I make that assumption through the instigation of the 7th consciousness. That includes like memory, like I heard that said before, and this is what happened when that was, I saw that done before, and this is what happens when that happens. I've tasted that before and I didn't like it. Whatever. But so now all of our consciousness is wrapped up in the external world. So I had a dream last night, and it was like just a dream. I know which consciousness it came out of. It was a dream about, I dreamt about Panyadeepa last night. Panyadeepa was around 30 and I was around 20. So I know that was a dream. It was like, because I didn't know him when he was 30. I didn't meet him till he was, I think 60, 70, 80, yeah, around 60. So there was a whole fabricated dream. So that's where your imagination is. We were young. We were part of a circus. And it was like a wild dream. I just woke up just laughing. So we were part of a circus, and I don't know what performances we did. But it was just a raucous, funny dream. So that's just imagination rolling around. Things all mixed up. A lot of people, that's why you can't like really depend a lot on your dreams. You have to, if you have no concept of consciousness, then you don't know where your dreams are coming from. So then you call somebody who interprets dreams, and you don't even know them. And then you rely on their interpretation of your dream instead of doing what you need to do to know your own mind. So when I have a dream, I know which consciousness it's coming out of. And I know whether it's imagination or not. But this is when you devote yourself to really knowing yourself. And that becomes the most important thing to you. And the more you begin to know your true self, the more you begin to loosen and let go of the egoic self, that which is false, that which is based, on our connection with the exterior world. And so in that space, there comes a release from the exterior world and a safety. One has a kind of inner safety. One can be with things, and when they don't do excellently, they can look like at themselves and see what was my part in it, of something that's 100% wrong, even if I have 1% of it and the 99% was on someone else. I'm looking at that 1%. that 1%. And I'm looking at it equal with the 99%. So that I can uproot what's in me. I don't know what somebody else's commitment is to awakening, to truth. I don't know, but I know what mine is. And although I may not be running on all cylinders, all the time, to just know which cylinders are firing and which ones are not. And then asking myself, what does that mean to you, Bonnie? And in this way, one grows. And it's not hard. It's not a taskmaster, because what comes with that is a certain kind of clarity. Because we come closer and closer to the gate of prajna, which is outside of our consciousness base. It is called the Dharmakaya, the Buddha nature, that which is unsullied, unstained, and pure. So if you cut me open, you won't find the Dharmakaya in there. All you'll find in there are more of the compounded elements. That's all you'll find in there. But there is a place within the field of consciousness that will take us to the Dharmakaya. So this is not a hard thing, and it's not an instantaneous thing. And you can see that it's more not effort driven. It's more surrender driven. And surrender might seem like a dirty word. Sacrifice might seem like a dirty word. But if you've ever surrendered, you know the peace and the joy that comes through surrender. It has benefits. And when you really sacrifice something, it's not in the sense of having to give up something or to give something or to do something, but it's an offering. And one knows the blessedness of an offering. That is something given back to you in such a profound measure that one sees that there was nothing that I gave that can measure up to what was given back to me. Maybe not like for like, not the same thing, but in a way that's meaningful to you. But you receive back in the sense of a kind of personal upliftment, a personal kind of peace, a personal broader perspective, personal freedom that would not have been possible except for the offering that you gave. It's the fruit of that coming back to you. And these are the secret things that I'm talking about, that spurring a person on their spiritual journey. These are the secret things. You may not see anything happening in their life that's in better. Matter of fact, a lot of it gets worse, because as we start laying down things, we're also laying down the trappings of the world in a certain way. That's your not just your pride, but your fame, your wealth, your ego, your beauty, you could just name it. Someone was telling me how, like, little by little, they're cutting off their friends. So being popular in our country, that's a thing, but suddenly don't need all of that. It's too much, too much. And we started laying down things like, and thinking, oh my God. I remember one of the times I got married is when I felt such a strong, strong calling on my life. And I was Pentecostal at that time. If you know anything about Pentecostal, long dresses, mostly dark colored, black hat, and we didn't do anything. Don't taste, don't touch, don't handle. I mean, nothing. And I was thinking, oh God, this I'm gonna have to be a preacher. Pentecostal preachers, you know them. If they go into the ministry young, they don't get husbands. So I was thinking like I better hurry up and get married before I answer this call. So that's what I did. So God come along, he met the profile. I met him and I think we got married about 2 months later because the call was heavy on me. It was heavy. And I was like, wait, I gotta get a husband first. Because if I start this preaching, I'm not gonna have a husband. And it was such a mistake. That's all I can say. But yeah, that's true. That was one of them. But it was honestly because every Pentecostal female preacher I knew that was young, didn't have, they didn't get married, they didn't have a husband. So let me run through the rest of these really quick. I'm just telling you how to look and to understand the knowledges so you could evaluate where you are. He said, so that was the first knowledge, to know what your mind is obsessed with and when it is obsessed and how that subsides and when it subsides, and then why it was obsessed. And he said, and first is just knowing it. Most of the time we don't recognize it. The second, he said, a noble disciple considers thus: when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this view, do I obtain internal serenity? And do I personally obtain stillness? So that can be your guide right there. That when your mind is obsessed in whatever way, do you obtain internal serenity? Do I personally obtain stillness? He said, if it doesn't, look at the ones that don't take you to that, the ones that cause that kind of agitation, whether it's gleeful or whether it's sorrowful. He said he understands when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this view, I obtain internal security. I personally obtain stillness. And this will be the second knowledge. Knowledge, knowing something about who? Yeah. Again, a noble disciple considers thus: is there any other recluse or Brahmin outside the Buddha's dispensation possessed of such a view? So I'm thinking back, like, what are you looking for and why are you here? So as a Christian, I had a certain view, But what made me pose the question to continue my search, I didn't know I'd have to go outside, of Christianity, organized Christianity, to find it. I didn't know that. I was asking a question within, what within the spirituality that I knew and understood, and I was just asking this question. I didn't know that it would require an true act of faith for me to step outside the boundaries of what I hold to be the ultimate truth. It did require that, and I made that choice. But the question that I posed was, I gave an altar call. When I gave the altar call, I gave a great sermon, and then I gave an altar call, right? And everybody in the church gets up and runs to the altar. I just gave a great sermon on we're the children of God and of this and of that and other. And then I gave an altar call. And that should have been for the few people who didn't know him like this and, coming that they might know him in his fullness and in his glory. I mean, I got it all down. I give altar call, the whole church runs up to the altar. I said, God, what's wrong with this? I said, why is it? Why is it that we never come up to the fullness of the measure of your stature? Why is it that we're constantly 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years running up to the altar, needing a blessing, needing a healing, needing wisdom, needing something? When do we come up to the fullness of the measure of your stature? That was my question. I ask you here in this Dharma hall today, when do we come up to the fullness of the measure of the stature of Buddha? When? If it's not possible, what are we doing? If it's not possible, that's fine. Then I'll just look, I'll pose that question and look for another. And so that was the question. And he said, there's more you need to know. What you learned already, good, useful. But there's more that you can know to be able to come into that place. You think you're just going to read something about someone who did everything that needed to be done, and because you read about them, then you inherit it? Then I learned about thought, action, and speech. I had thoughts, I had the speech, but I didn't have the action. That's when it gets tough. When you have to actually put the action behind your thoughts and your speech. He said, again, a noble disciple thus considers. He understands that there is no other reclusive or Brahmin outside the Buddha's dispensation possessed of such a view, that it is action driven. This is the third knowledge. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view. Although he may commit some kind of offense for which a means of rehabilitation has been laid down, still he at once confesses, he reveals, he discloses it to the teacher or to wise companions in the holy life. And having done that, he enters upon restraint for the future. Just as a young, tender infant lying prone at once draws back when he puts his hand or his foot on a live coal, so too, that is the character of a person who possesses right view. At the minute it comes into your awareness, and you touch something, like touching fire that's hot. We don't get around, talk about it and laugh about it later. It's like becoming fearful of the least infraction. Not like you scared of everything, but it's designed to be a teaching tool. It's like, watch out for that. Be careful about that. You don't have to go, scared of every little thing. It's just an inward training. You understand what I mean? It's an inward training. It's not for you to train me. It's not for me to train you. But when the Dharma teaches, it's to equip us so that we train who? We train ourselves. It becomes an inner training. It's not something to blame you for when we see it. It's not something for you to blame me for, but we look and we just recognize that's developing right view. Not a blame game. It's just developing right view. He understands then through this way, I possess the character of a person who possesses right view. And this is the fourth knowledge. Now, he's talking about knowledges, right? That means it's something that you know, that you know, that you know. So if people mislabel you, people have the wrong impression of you, people have the wrong idea, people mischaracterize you, people misjudge you, then you don't have to be so upset about that because you know yourself. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view. Although he may be active in various matters for his companions in the holy life, yet he has a keen regard for training in higher virtue, training the higher mind, and training into the higher wisdom. Just as a cow with a new calf, while she grazes, watches her calf, so too, this is the character of a person who possesses right view. And then he understands, in time I possess the character of a person who possesses right view. And this is the fifth knowledge obtained by him. And this knowledge is noble, it is super mundane, and it is not shared by ordinary people. And again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view? What is the strength of a person who possesses right view? This is the strength of a person who possesses right view. I like these because they're very repetitive, and a lot of times they have ... meaning, read the paragraph above, all of that goes in there too. But I like it because that's the reinforcement. It's like, I hear it again, listen, it's important. I'm going to tell you one more time. And then he tells you, but he's already set you up to really be vigilant and to be listening deeply. He says, when the Dharma and the discipline, not just the Dharma and the discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he heeds it. He gives attention to it. He engages it with all of his mind, and he hears the Dharma with eager ears. And in time, he will understand this. I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view. This is the sixth knowledge attained. Again, he considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view? When the Dharma and the discipline is proclaimed by the Tathagata and is being taught, he gains inspiration in the meaning. He gains inspiration in the Dharma. He gains gladness connected with the Dharma. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view. Our strength is in the inspiration of the meaning and the gladness that arises. And when a noble disciple is thus possessed of these 7 factors, he has well sought the character for realization. What kind of realization? Realization of the fruit of stream entry. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of these 7 factors, he possesses the fruit of stream entry. And stream entry means that one has reached a certain level where realization is definitely in their future, no falling back. So I don't know where you are today. I know where I am. There is no falling back. And that gives me a certain stability, even though I may still do things. I may not be perfected, but what I know is that I have reached a place in truth knowing that there's no falling back. This is what the Blessed One said, and the bhikkhus were satisfied, yes, and delighted in his word. That is Sutta number 48 in the Majjhima Nikaya. The Sutta to the Kasambians. And it's good to read this Sutta because before he talks about those 7 aspects, he talks about verbal, mental, and bodily acts of loving kindness and cordiality that create love and respect and conduce to cohesion, to non-dispute, to accord, and to unity. And we have to have those. When we don't have that, we can't get to these attainments. So we think it's so much that we have to do on our reading and our knowing, our knowledge in these kinds of ways, but it's not about that. It comes through our cordiality with one another. That's a big thing, isn't it? Yeah, that's a whole nother Dharma talk, so I won't go there. So I think I will end right there. I do want to 114. I can't do this in a minute, so I'll end it right there. Maybe I'll pick this up next week because I really want to focus on the 7th and the 8th consciousness. So that you can really understand that we understand the 5. We understand the mind and the thoughts that's the 6. But I want to get to the other 2 consciousnesses, the subconscious and where we have like group consciousness, ancestral consciousness, our tie to previous life, and then and I want to talk about those things next because I think it'll help you to understand yourself and also to assess when thoughts arise, where they're arising from and how they are arising. So we're moving into a stage now where we're not so much dependent on getting better through picking up more knowledge, but through our actions, because that's where the story is. And we all know enough already, but how do we move it from just knowing to being able to walk it out in real time, and the kind of inspiration that comes that brings life to the path. A path is to be walked, not to be read about, mentally assented to, but is to be walked out. And the joy that one finds will be in the walking out of the path. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you and no danger. May you always be able to meet the inevitable difficulties of life. Anybody have anything you'd like to say, please feel free. No? Okay.